Welcome back to HOA Karen Stories, where we dive into the wildest HOA dramas you'll ever hear. Today's story is about an HOA president who thought she was above the law, until she messed with the wrong car. Get ready for a story of power, arrogance, and the ultimate downfall of a Karen who went too far. Let's dive in. HOA Karen calls a tow truck on a black limousine. But it belonged to President Donald Trump. The Silver Oaks neighborhood was known for its pristine lawns, well-manicured gardens, and the ever-watchful eye of its HOA president, Karen Whitmore. She ruled the community with an iron fist, imposing fines for the most trivial infractions, mailboxes an inch too high, holiday decorations left up a day too long, even the color of people's front doors. If there was a rule, Karen was determined to enforce it, often with unnecessary zeal. One crisp morning, Karen stepped out onto her front porch, coffee cup in hand, ready for her routine patrol of the neighborhood. As she glanced across the street, her eyes immediately locked onto something that made her blood boil: a massive black limousine parked in front of Alex Carter's house. The sleek, polished vehicle stood out like a sore thumb in what she considered her perfect neighborhood. Alex Carter had always been a thorn in her side. He wasn't the type to bow to HOA rules, and he had openly challenged her authority before. Seeing that oversized vehicle outside his house felt like a direct challenge, a blatant violation of her sacred rule book. Without hesitation, Karen stormed back inside, grabbed her phone, and dialed the tow company. Her voice dripped with authority as she barked orders. "I need a tow truck immediately at Silver Oaks. There's a gross violation of HOA regulations. A vehicle far too large for street parking. I don't care whose car it is, just get it out of here." Hanging up, she smirked. Another victory for her. Another battle won in the endless war to keep her neighborhood in perfect order. Little did she know, this time, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. As Karen stood triumphantly on the sidewalk, arms crossed and eyes locked onto the limousine like a predator eyeing its prey, the front door of Alex Carter's house swung open. Out stepped Alex, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his presence exuding authority and confidence. A successful entrepreneur and a man with deep connections, Alex had dealt with power-hungry people like Karen before. He had long suspected that she had a personal vendetta against him. But this was beyond ridiculous. He approached her with an air of calmness, but his sharp gaze showed he meant business. "Karen, I suggest you think carefully before you do something you'll regret." Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. She didn't even let him finish before she snapped back. "I don't need your advice, Alex. This vehicle is in direct violation of HOA regulations, and I am well within my rights to have it removed." Alex took a slow step forward, lowering his voice just enough to make Karen second-guess herself. "Do you even know whose car that is?" For the briefest moment, Karen hesitated. But then, her ego kicked in. Who cared? Rules were rules, and she was the one who enforced them. She raised her phone back to her ear, her voice laced with impatience as she barked at the tow company. "Get that truck here now. I don't care whose car this is, it's being towed." Alex exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You should care, Karen. Because when you find out, it'll be too late." Karen ignored him completely, a smug grin spreading across her face. She had won, again. Or so she thought. What happened next would be a moment she would never forget. The tow truck rumbled down the street, its massive metal hook clanking as it prepared to latch onto the sleek black limousine. Karen stood proudly on the sidewalk, arms crossed, reveling in her small victory. She imagined how furious Alex must be, watching helplessly as his illegal vehicle was hauled away under her authority. But then, chaos erupted. Out of nowhere, 4 men in sharp, black suits stormed onto the scene, moving with the kind of urgency that sent a ripple of panic through the air. Dark sunglasses, earpieces, and an unmistakable aura of authority. They weren't just any men. They were Secret Service agents. The tow truck driver, who had just been about to hook onto the limousine's undercarriage, froze in place, his hands trembling. The leader of the agents stepped forward, his cold gaze locking onto Karen like a hawk eyeing its prey. "Ma'am," he said in a dangerously calm voice, "did you just order the towing of this vehicle?" Karen, still high on her power trip, huffed impatiently. "Of course I did. This car is violating HOA regulations. And in this neighborhood, we follow the rules." The agent didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, his voice dropping to an almost chilling level. "You just ordered the towing of a vehicle belonging to former President Donald J. Trump." Silence. Karen's face, once flushed with arrogance, drained of all color. Her smug expression collapsed in an instant. What?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could even process the words, the door to the limousine swung open, and out stepped Donald Trump himself, dressed in a crisp navy suit. The former president adjusted his tie, squinting slightly under the morning sun as he casually surveyed the scene. His eyes landed on Karen, his expression a mix of mild amusement and sheer disbelief. For the first time in her life, Karen was speechless. Karen's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest like a drumbeat of pure panic. The confidence, the smugness, the air of superiority, all of it vanished in an instant. She had just ordered the towing of a former U.S. president's limousine. The Secret Service agents stood motionless, their faces unreadable, their presence alone exuding an unspoken authority. The tow truck driver had already backed away, clearly wanting no part of whatever disaster was about to unfold. Karen forced a strained, awkward smile, her lips twitching as she scrambled for a way out. "Oh, Mr. President," she blurted out, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. What a surprise. I had no idea this was your car. If I had known, of course, I never would have." Trump tilted his head slightly, his eyes narrowing in a way that made Karen's stomach twist into knots. Slowly, he crossed his arms over his chest. "Oh. So what you're saying is, if it were someone else's car, you would have done it?" Karen's breath caught in her throat. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Trump raised an eyebrow, watching as Karen desperately tried to piece together an excuse that didn't exist. He let the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. The gathered neighbors, who had started to peek out from their houses to witness the spectacle, whispered amongst themselves, some even stifling laughter. Karen, the unshakable HOA president, the self-proclaimed enforcer of the rules, had just been caught in her own hypocrisy. And there was no escape. Karen stood frozen, her mind still trying to process the disaster she had created. The Secret Service agents remained stoic, their posture rigid as they exchanged quick, silent glances. They had a protocol for situations like this. And it didn't involve letting a power-hungry HOA president run amok without consequences. Though Trump himself seemed more amused than angry. The situation wasn't something his security detail could simply brush off. The lead agent pulled out a secure communication device, murmuring a few words into his earpiece. Within moments, the local authorities were notified. Karen's fake smile finally collapsed. She turned to Trump, her hands clasped together in desperation. "Sir? Please. This was all a misunderstanding. I was just trying to enforce the rules." Trump simply shrugged, unbothered. "Well, maybe you should have read the rules yourself before making such a huge mistake." It didn't take long before news of the incident spread like wildfire. The entire neighborhood caught wind of what had happened. And the backlash was instantaneous. Neighbors, many of whom had endured years of Karen's overbearing enforcement, erupted in outrage. They flooded the HOA board with complaints, demanding her immediate resignation. A formal investigation was launched into Karen's history of abuse of power. And suddenly, every single ridiculous fine, every unreasonable towing, every case of harassment came under scrutiny. Within a week, Karen had no choice but to step down. The woman who had once ruled Silver Oaks like a dictator was now a disgraced nobody, reduced to avoiding eye contact with her neighbors whenever she walked outside. Meanwhile, Alex Carter, the man she had tried to humiliate, hosted a massive neighborhood barbecue in celebration. The very street where she had tried to have the limousine towed was now packed with cheerful residents, laughing, eating, and reveling in the fact that the HOA was finally free of Karen Whitmore. And as Alex stood on his porch, watching the sun set over a Karen-free Silver Oaks, he raised his glass and smirked. Here's to learning the hard way, Karen. From that day forward, the name Karen Whitmore became nothing more than a cautionary tale in Silver Oaks. Her reign of terror was over. Her once feared presence now a fading memory. Without her constant meddling, the neighborhood thrived. Residents no longer lived in fear of receiving arbitrary fines for leaving their trash cans out a minute too long or parking their cars an inch outside the designated spots. The community felt lighter, freer, and far more peaceful. The new HOA leadership, chosen by a majority vote, focused on helping residents rather than controlling them. Instead of absurd restrictions and threats, they encouraged collaboration. Instead of pointless fines, they focused on real improvements that benefited everyone. And as for tow trucks, let's just say that no one in Silver Oaks ever called one again without double-checking whose car they were towing. The story of Karen's downfall spread beyond the neighborhood, becoming something of an urban legend. Other HOAs even used it as a warning about the dangers of power-hungry presidents who let their egos get the best of them. As for Karen herself, she disappeared from public life, unable to show her face without being reminded of the disastrous mistake that cost her everything. And so, Silver Oaks moved on, stronger, happier, and finally free. So, what do you think about this wild HOA disaster? Do you think Karen got what she deserved? Or do you think she'll try to pull something like this again somewhere else? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Jaeger Stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss another crazy HOA showdown. I've got plenty more stories where this came from, so stay tuned for the next one. See you in the next video.